based scholars who advocate that our research methods need to be more inclusive and think about who participates in them and how, and also to think about the potential liberating and life-enhancing components of that scholarship. And we think that those sorts of research methods improve our ability to make a better world that is more fair and more free, a more just one. But we asked, how is it that we can analyze our research? How is it that data analysis in qualitative research provides an opportunity for us to make claims that help us challenge and transform structures and discourses that might marginalize, oppress, and impoverish? We want our claims to move people to action, academics, professionals, policymakers, and citizens. And so yes, our claims come from our data, but also to diverse stakeholders operating within broader contexts of scholarship and society. So today we'd like to offer a set of practices for making claims that matter. It's a toolkit, or an herb garden, or a set of brushes, pick the metaphor you prefer. Our work draws on a variety of thinkers from across the philosophical and scholarly spectrum, and our contribution today is to put them in a similar place as a set of tools for action. We invite you, if you are currently engaged in some form of community activism or some form of qualitative scholarship, to take a moment to call that project to mind and to kind of walk through imaginatively with that project and get a little data analysis done today while you're in our presentation. So some folks imagine thinking or analysis looks like this, but it turns out that knowledge actually looks a little bit more like this. We are communal knowers, and justification is a community process. And so we start with thinking about that.
All right, so we have this metaphor that we call the community cocktail party, and this is a shout out to some of my past mentors as well. But from this point of view, right, any type of research to make a difference is figuring out who's in your cocktail party, who's in your community, and so that starts by, reading lots of books and figuring out who your peeps are, and then along the way, really getting to know those community members. What are their interests? What are their concerns? What do they know? What do they not know? And just like a cocktail party, very few of us are bright enough and smart enough to just go into a room of people we don't know and just start talking and have people come talk to us, right? Some of us are, but most of us have to listen first, right? So doing that listening and thinking, what's going to be a good joke for this group? Then figuring out themes in our research that are actually of interest to that cocktail party, being specific about those people, and then finally pulling it all together. So that's one of our heuristics.
So we think that this helps us make claims that have impact because it clarifies the social context that your claims will ultimately be operating in. And the community-based justification helps us think critically about the different kinds of warrant or the criteria for knowledge that different stakeholders have. So in my work around homelessness, I might need to make one kind of argument for a set of nonprofit practitioners, but another kind of argument for a scholarly audience, and another kind of argument still yet for people who regularly live without shelter. So let's turn to how we make claims. There's a lot of talk in qualitative research about how qualitative research is inductive, which is like asking, do I have a big enough pile of information in order to make a strong claim? But we find that abduction is a really powerful form of logic. Abduction has a couple of steps.
It has 3 steps, and one is to state or discover a surprising fact in your data, right? What surprises you? Then conjecture a claim that accounts for that surprising fact. And Tim's going to draw us through an example here. And then articulate how the claim explains that fact, and then look for support. So
instead of taking an activist example, we're going to take a silly one, just for fun. We have the surprising fact of a caped flying pig. Anyone want to conjecture a claim that would make this surprising fact a matter of course?
Country fair.
Country fair, all right, so a country fair, it turns out that you're probably not wrong. This is a pig race, right? And so we conjecture a pig race would make a caped leaping pig not that surprising, and then we would look for how that claim explains the fact. So it's a race, they need numbers, hence the cape. It's a race, there are obstacles, hence the leaping. Conjecturing claims is a strategy that can be used to invite wild imagination. And that wild imagination helps us as thinkers make connections that are otherwise left under-articulated. In social justice contexts, there are often under-voiced stakeholders, but it's often the case that there are also under-voiced problems and solutions, and that under-articulation limits our ability to act. And so this creates the creative space to make those claims. So once you have a claim, you might want a question.
All right. So you might think about research questions coming before the themes. And what we're suggesting, and this isn't new for many of us in here that are qualitative researchers, is that the answers of our research questions oftentimes come before the research questions. We come up with our themes, and then we've got to conjecture the research question to which our themes or our findings answer. And so we use this metaphor of the Jeopardy research questions, and we go through in the piece about how best to do that, especially when we have these sort of deductive, linear journal articles that suggest that the research question always comes first. Yeah. I don't know if I said anything that's on that slide, but it connects up.
Yeah. This approach is particularly useful for making use of available data. And the question generation approach is very helpful in the activist context, nonprofit context, grant-seeking context, and even activist rhetorical spaces, because problem solution is like a really vivid sort of logic that gets articulated. And so being able to say, well, here's my data and the claim that I've made, so here's the research question, allows us to draw analogy to say, well, here's my problem and my solution. And so you can ask, who else values the answers to these questions, right, as a way of testing if the claims that you're making are going to matter to anyone. So it turns out that there are actually also different kinds of knowledge. So we can be articulating different kinds of claims entirely. There's epistemic knowledge we often transact at academic conferences, which is abstract theoretical knowledge. But there's also technical knowledge for dealing with everyday contingency. And there's also phronetic knowledge, which is helping generate context-based judgment.
Okay, so phronesis, we're borrowing a lot of Bent Fluberg's work and ideas here. And he suggests that these 4 questions can be really helpful for getting at practical wisdom, helping people know how to morally act in a certain place. So where are we going? Who gains and who loses, and by what mechanisms of power? So thinking about power at both macro, micro, meso levels. Asking, is this development desirable? And if so, to whom? Yep. And then 4, what, if anything, should we do about it? So getting to the normative there. And so you can use this at the beginning of your research project or along the way, or even to frame your findings.
So phonetic knowledge is particularly valuable for us asking ourselves, what is necessary for a person acting in this context in order to act wisely, in order to act ethically, in order to act in a way that is in the pursuit of justice? Because policymakers, leaders, activists, and community members often have to make decisions in contexts where they do not have the luxury of knowing what will happen if they had chosen otherwise. Like, you gotta get it right, or you gotta get it good enough on the first turn. And so qualitative research can provide the resources for contributing to those practically wise decisions. So there are 2 more tools that we go through in the paper, which you can read in Qualitative Inquiry. That's a commercial. One of them, which I'll briefly summarize, is draws on embodiment as a way of thinking about claims. Once you have a claim, you can carry it into the field and kind of ask, does this claim change the way that I act? Does it help me make sense? Does it motivate me? Does it move me? You can literally write the claim in your paper, on a piece of paper, and put it in your pocket and carry it in the field. And then we offer a set of reflective practices for kind of drawing back down on the impact that has. We also draw on pretty classic form of claim tightening that comes out of grounded theory, a la negative case analysis, that kind of helps people think through the process of how they can use their own data to disprove the claims that they've made as a way of deciding whether or not it's as strong as you think it is, or going back into the fields to look for contradictory evidence to maybe reject claims entirely, say, no, actually that's not the case, or to nuance them and tighten them so they continue to be true. So real quickly, I'll give you an example. I was working in a permanent supportive housing project, which permanently housed people who used to be homeless, so they're not homeless people, they have houses. But this project has programs that exist around the housing unit. So my cocktail party are the nonprofit staff, the residents of the organization, OrgCom scholars, and nonprofit scholars. I found surprising in the data that community and participation in the organization didn't co-occur. While most people were active and felt like they were members of the community, there were these small subgroups of people who were involved but didn't feel a part, and there were people who weren't involved but felt connected to the community. So I claim that place and identity play a role in feelings of inclusion. So the people who it seemed like they had lived on Skid Row for a really long time, 10 years or more, they weren't involved in the programs, but they felt like they were a part of Skid Row. And so your imagination of, oh, you're gonna feel like a community, you're involved in the community if you're involved, not necessarily. If you identify with the place, you might feel included. So I kind of circle back around and say, does this help explain? Does length of time at Skid Row make you more likely to not be involved? And well, actually, most organizations require participation in order to get services, and so one that doesn't, suddenly they're like, no, I'm done. I don't need to keep being involved if I don't have to be. And also, their friends on the street that aren't part of the organization, but they continue to socialize with, make them feel members of that community. So anyway, for the sake of time, I'm going to keep moving. But as you see, this example is supposed to show that we encourage you to move through these practices as they are useful to you. So in closing, I will simply say that we believe that qualitative research is really powerful for generating questions, imagining possibilities, revealing things, attending to context, and being critical, which is very convenient because we also believe that social justice relies on generation, imagination, revelation, context, and critique. We hope that you find these tools useful. We have a set of worksheets if you want to take them for yourself or your students, and you can read about it. Thank you.